All right. Well, good evening and welcome. We are, again, glad to see you tonight or have you here with us. My name is Tammy Burns. I am the executive director over at PEATC and the parent of three, um, their siblings, all three of them. And one of my middle child, Jared, has autism and an intellectual disability, and my other two children sandwich him in terms of ages, and have we've had lots of conversations with them over the years, from little to now adults, on what their perspective is on siblings. And I'm happy tonight to be able to bring together the group you see here of adult siblings of individuals with disabilities to share their lived experiences with you, the joys, the challenges, the unique roles that siblings and their perspective on their unique role have held over time. Our hope is this conversation is going to offer you some insight and encouragement, as well as resources and a feeling of connection for siblings and families who are navigating similar journeys. Um, these speakers, the four they're very thoughtful individuals who bring both a personal experience and a deep commitment to supporting the disability community. And I'm sure you're going to um, learn a lot from them tonight. So I am going to let them get started because you want to hear from them more than you want to hear from me. I'm going to start us off, and I'll start with Anne, and then one of our other panelists can go as well. But Anne, could you just start us off and just briefly introduce yourself and share a little bit about your sibling?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this opportunity. I'm Ann Flippin. I am a sibling to a young man with autism, Jamie, who's now 35 years old. We live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm also the executive director of the Autism Society of Central Virginia, and I'm really proud to lead that organization and grow services and supports for local individuals with autism. And I meant to screen share photos. Let me do that real quick.
Oh, yeah.
These are some photos of Jamie and my journey. So you'll see him and my dad back in the day doing the Autism Society 5K and Family Fun Day, to then us together at the Duck Race and Festival of Inclusion that I helped bring back to Richmond a few years ago. Here we are celebrating my birthday in November. And then Jamie lives with a caregiver, a wonderful caregiver through sponsored residential, and another young man with autism. So that's his crew there in the bottom right. So really excited to be here with you all this evening and to share and learn from everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Anne. Who would like to go next?
Go. Um, Hi, everyone. My name is Nia Harrison, and I work at a small state agency called the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. We do policy advocacy, we fund grant projects, and we also have some training programs. And I'm almost 38 years old, just a couple of weeks from now. But when I was growing up, I was an only child for many, many years. And I asked my parents, I begged them apparently to give me a sibling. So when I was 12 years old, my sister Yasmin Harrison was born. We call her Yazzie for short. And I'll share some photos as well of the two of us together. So hopefully y'all can see that. So just put some photos together. There's one from almost 15 years ago and one that's more recent, and then some in between. But try to have fun, just building a snowman and doing a wine tasting, which she didn't really enjoy, as you can tell. Doing some card games and doing some Christmas shopping. And she is 26 years old now, and she lives in Hampton, Virginia with our parents, and I live here in Richmond, Virginia.
So great. How about Kim? Were you ready to share?
Yes, I was trying to get my photo together.
Oh, okay. You want us to go
No,
back
you
to
are
you?
fine. No,
Okay.
you're fine. I have
All
one.
right.
Hi, my name is Kim Wilson. I am the caregiver for, he would love to hear this right now, my older brother. He's the middle but he always says he's older and I'm the baby sister. Barry Vaughn, he has cerebral palsy. He was born with cerebral palsy. My father passed away in 21, my mom in 23, and around that time frame, I started taking over his care. And he is in a day program with Reese Family Services, and we're both under sponsor residential. So I am his caregiver. He lives with me full time. Um, and he does the program Monday through Friday, and I am that in between. Um, he's very talkative, very social, has a great personality, loves to dress, loves to attend church and sing in the choir, and play his tambourine. And he has a great personality and a great spirit about him. And so I'm going to show you a picture of him.
Awesome.
Let's see here. Hopefully I'm doing this correctly.
There it comes.
And that's one of the pictures from their Christmas social that they had in December. And he was on the floor dancing. So,
That's awesome. And I can see, I know you mentioned he loves to dress. He is dressed right there. I can
yes,
tell.
yes.
Yeah, look, he looks great. He looks great.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. And Walter.
Very nice to so excited to be here tonight. My name is Walter Suskind. I am a 37-year-old now man. I live in Brooklyn, New York. My younger brother is 35. Owen, he's autistic. He lives in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in a wonderful independent supported living community out on the Cape. Owen and I have always been very close. We have a lot of shared loves. One of them, and I'll show a picture in a second, is his lifelong love of Disney, which Disney and movies overall, which has really helped him connect with, so many people, connect with the world. My parents are both still in Boston, Massachusetts, so they are still his primary caregivers. But certainly, as I've gotten older, things have begun to, approach that time when we are much more actively thinking about what does the future look like? How can I start gaining momentum to be able to step into these roles that they've been driving for so long? And that's kind of how I had the pleasure of being connected, well, with Anne first years ago, but Tammy recently. So just really excited to be here. And I guess I will cap it off by sharing a picture from a while back, but this is us extremely wet at a water park after a water park ride a few years back. But yeah, just excited, really excited for this conversation, and Annie and Kim, really excited to be sitting here with you all tonight.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing. My favorite part, of course, is the pictures because it gives us a little glimpse into who's your sibling and some little information about how you're connected. And we're gonna some of the things you guys have already mentioned. We're going to delve into that, especially that now that you're an adult and your sibling is older and an adult in most cases, and what that looks like and navigating that. But I wanted to start just to give a brief. You've talked about your siblings a little bit. Let's talk about like when you were growing up and as you begin to realize that you have a sibling who your experience with your sibling may have been different or more unique than some of your friends' experiences with their brothers or sisters. So if someone would just talk about that a little bit, talk about moments when you felt like your role was different as a sibling than maybe your friends, your peers' experiences with their sibling.
I'll go first. I guess when I think back to, growing up, and when we were smaller, um, I never focused on my brother's disability. Um, we played like I would say normal kids. Um, you know, um, growing up, he at one point he was not able to walk. He was crawling, and my mother pushed to get him support that helped him to begin to walk. But he was running up and down the street with the rest of us. Um, he was out and about. He was, everything kind of I was involved in, he was involved in.
Mm.
Um, and I always felt like as the baby sister, I felt like the mother, like, I was the protector. So,
Right.
I always went in protection mode when it came to him, being out in the public, if folks, wanted to stare or, do little things, I was just always in protective mode. But I never saw him, I never focused on his disability.
Okay, good. Anyone else want to,
Sure.
chime in about that and kind of what your childhood
Yeah.
experiences were compared to others?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like Kim's saying, I always, from a young age, kind of felt like a third parent to my brother. I felt incredibly protective. I think it's the same, a little different from Kim though. Like for me and Owen, I was always very aware of kind of the difference of, his experience compared to my experience or compared to my friends and their siblings' experiences. And, you know, I think it was one of those things where it was what it was. And because I didn't really know any other siblings like me, and it was something I always felt a little uncomfortable talking to my parents about, I just kind of tried to roll with it as best I could. And like, not saying that in any way this was like the ideal, but it just was kind of my experience of, I certainly struggled with how to deal with it. Maybe not in terms of my relationship with him, but especially in terms of like talking to other kids about what was going on with Owen or how, okay, we're out in public, like what's going to happen here. And like, if I could go back, I wish, you always replay like, oh, I wish I'd done this differently or that differently. But I think it was just very much part of growing up where I was kind of, because I just didn't want to go to my parents with it, kind of just tried to navigate it on my own.
Yeah.
I wish I had met Walter 20 years before I did. I feel like growing up, it was really isolating. I really didn't know anyone else who had a sibling, um, like, like I did. So, and I was or am 5 years older than him. So I've always been that kind of, my mom would call me like mini mommy. I'm always protective, but it definitely had its challenges. And our routine, I mean, he has a lot of complex medical challenges as well. And so we spent a lot of time in and out of doctor's offices and going to a different therapist after school each day. Be like, who are we going to today? And I was the kid that waited in the waiting room and did my homework. But it was kind of our routine. And, so it was challenging, but I think it taught me so much at the same time that I'm looking back, like wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know my own, and I'm not a sibling as in the sense that you guys are, of an individual with disability, but I know my own kids when they were young. My son, at times would, he'd come in and we'd been at the pool and he would come in and he would lose his bathing suit all the way through the house, right? And my daughter had friends over and they're 9 and 10 years old, and here he comes through the house without his bathing suit. And she was mortified, like, Mom, make him not do that. And I remember those points in life, and she's now his biggest cheerleader and supporter. But there are moments when she was even embarrassed, of what was happening for one reason or another. Nia, what about you?
Yeah,
I saw you
and
were about to unmute.
yeah, yeah, it's hard on Zoom sometimes, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, it felt a little different because of the age gap that we had. So, I was 12 when she was born. So there were only 6 years that we lived together before I went off to college,
Okay.
in another part of the state. But I definitely felt more of that parental role that some of you were mentioning. I remember doing a lot of babysitting, changing diapers even. So some of it was the age gap, but then some of it was
Yeah.
also Yeah, some of it was also the disability. Because I remember being in therapy appointments with her when both my parents were still working. I would go sit in like occupational therapy, for example, and make sure I knew what was happening in the therapy appointments and then try to help outside of that. So I got to see it from that perspective as well, which was really interesting. So.
Yeah. So let's take that, Nia, for a minute. I'm going to piggyback right back to you on that, since there is that age gap for you. And I know um, that, some are close here and some are an age gap or is pretty far away. Um, Through that, as you were the sibling and while you're there and even now, have you felt any sort of sense of responsibility placed on you, or feel like there may be some responsibility that you've taken on for helping advocate or support Yazzie? And how's that kind of played out in your life together?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I was younger, it was more just the responsibility of helping and babysitting and raising her at her young age. But
Right.
now I do feel like I get to play more of that traditional sibling role, and I try to bring more of that fun. So some of those photos I showed with the snowmen and the wine tasting, I feel like I'm getting to experience that now in older age, just because of the gap, having her be a little bit older. But as Walter said at the beginning, it's definitely been more and more on my mind as I've gotten older, as my parents have gotten older. It's been more on my mind of what's coming down the road. And so trying to be mentally prepared for that, but also knowing that you can't fully prepare. And I know we'll probably get into some of those topics a little bit more later on. But my parents were really great in trying to keep the burden, so to speak, of figuring out all the supports and services and navigating through school. I think they've been really great in trying not to put too much of that on me when I was younger and going through college. And they wanted me to kind of have my own experience and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I've been lucky to not have to take a lot of that on in earlier years, but I'm certainly at that point where it's more and more in my mind that, I need to be ready to take on a larger role when that time comes.
Yeah. And I know, you and I know we have known each other for a while. Like we were talking at the beginning before everybody got on. I there's a picture of Jamie at the 5K from 2017, you said?
No,
27,
2009.
2007. Oh,
Yeah.
2009.
Yeah.
Okay. Long, long time ago. And that's the picture in my head of Jamie. That's I've seen him and
Yeah.
talked to him and many times on the 5K route. Look, in that case, but I know, and from that, I know your responsibilities as being a young sibling, and then even today have shifted some. How have you felt
Yes.
some shifting in that, and that
Yeah.
maybe that sense of responsibility that maybe you put there or you felt was just there?
I definitely put it there when I was younger, and my parents never put that pressure on me, but I put it on myself. And I always felt that way. I always wanted to take care of him when I got older. And then, so my father passed away 10 years ago now. So hard to believe it's been that long, but I really stepped into more of a hands-on role with my mom at that point. And I spent a lot of time learning, what's the day-to-day. Like we found this incredible caregiving setup for him. I knew my mom couldn't do it alone, and the day-to-day was difficult. He has very high support needs and complex challenges with day to day. He's currently in a wheelchair and can't toilet, can't feed himself, can't he sleeps with oxygen at night. And there's a lot of complexities there. And as my mom's aging, I wanted to make sure that both of them were taken care of. And so, really blessed to have a wonderful caregiver for him, and he's really doing just thriving right now with that care. But I take on a lot of the behind the scenes things, and I think my mom still does a lot, but I'm learning as much as I can now because I know at some point she's not going to be able to do it anymore, and I want to learn and be able to ask her questions while she's still here and able to help me. So we're transitioning everything over very slowly. As time goes on. I now have two young children. I have, time's flying. They're actually 6 and 9, almost 9 now. And it's been neat having just seeing the relationship that they're now forming with my brother and just having those family moments together. And they love their Uncle Jamie, and it's a different type of relationship, but now they're, the biggest fans of the Autism Society and coming to our events and meeting other kiddos with autism. It's been really neat kind of coming full circle like that.
Well, and stepping over there, I mean, Kim, you've had, Ann mentioned her father passing away, but your role in Barry's life, I'm guessing, shifted when it shifted significantly after the passing or around the passing of your parents. Can you share? Are you willing to share a little bit about that transition? I know you talked about being the primary caregiver now, but what that was like for you, and what that learning curve, if you will,
Yes.
might have looked like.
Yes. So my dad passed in 21. I want to say, I don't want to say towards the end of COVID, but we were still kind of in the midst of that. He passed away from cancer.
Mm,
And then we switched gears with my mom, and she was eventually diagnosed with dementia.
mm,
And we had to place her in a home. And so at that point, I took over his care. Growing up, I always knew that I was going to, Barry would live with me if there's something happened with my parents. That just was something I had always said and had set in my spirit. Um, but it wasn't an easy transition. So we have an older brother, but he's married and so forth. I am a widow, and I have a daughter that is 22. And so there was just a lot going on back then. I made the decision to take over his care. Um, and in that process, it was very, in a sense, chaotic from the standpoint of his records and various things that I needed.
mm.
You know, there was a lot of things we weren't able to find. Again, with my mom's diagnosis, things were hidden, things were misplaced, and so forth. So, um, I knew who his case manager was, pre-COVID, but when that hit, um, a lot of the programs shut down, and as they started to come back up, Barry is considered a fall risk. So a lot of programs back then would not take him on. And his case manager had transitioned on somewhere else. So I really started from ground zero with getting him a case manager, with um, learning about the Medicare, the Medicaid. He has both, and that whole process of, how I need to file yearly, how I need to do this, how I need to do that. His doctors, um, not knowing when the last time he had an eye appointment, dental, all of those. So I had to find them, get him connected, and start getting him seen. Um, it was a lot. It
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
lot, on top of the loss and the fact that I work full time, and then also trying to get him into a program. Because when COVID hit and everything shut down, of course, we were all at home. Once everything started to open back up again, struggled to get him into a program. So he was at home. Barry is a very sociable person. He likes to be around people. He'll talk to a stranger in a minute, just a conversation.
sounds
Um,
like Jamie, right, Ann?
yeah. And so, I and everyone was pushing me at that time to um have someone to come into the home. And I was like, no, he's been in the house long enough. He wants to get out. He wants to, be in the community. And so we found a program through Reese Family Services, and he loves it. But as far as my experience, yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a rocky road, and I still run into things here or there. It's different. Um, everybody spoke on, being able to plan. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to plan. And so even though have always known that I would be his caregiver if something happened with my parents, um, taking on that task it's been a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot of changes, not just for him, but just for myself as well. Um, and so, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and that reminds me, and Walter, I'm gonna ping over to you because when I first met you, you and I had a really great conversation, and we had some conversation around some of the things that Kim just shared. I know I was going to ask you to share a little bit about Sib Strong in a way to talk about. You talk to siblings across the country.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you some of those common themes or concerns that you hear from siblings, through that kind of transition of caregiver and all of those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the top line is the common concerns are the ones we are talking about right now on this call. I think
Yeah.
it's, you talk to siblings at every, stage of the journey, whether they're in Kim's position, whether they're, part of the way in like Anne is, whether they're in me or Nia's position of, knowing, you're about to be jumping into this more. And I think, at a high level, I think a lot of us and a lot of our families, we struggle with the communication part as the first building block. And I think the biggest takeaway I have from that, from talking to parents, from talking to siblings, is that's obviously totally normal. These are super heavy, emotionally charged things we're talking about here. Of course, they're going to be difficult to talk about, but, and even from my own experience, you know, you don't want to talk about it. And I remember my parents, Nia, I think you said it from as long as I can remember, this idea of like, they always say, hey, we want you to live your own life. We don't want Owen to be a burden for you. Well, Owen is my life. Owen is a part of my life. And it's, the more so I think the more these conversations can happen, and it doesn't have to be the entire conversation at once, but figuring out little ways to kind of drop it in the water, to have a 5 minute conversation, to just have a status check and things like that. When I talk to siblings where they feel more informed or more in control, things like that, I think, communication, like in any good relationship, communication is a huge part. And then, but I also think, I hear from a lot of siblings who feel daunted by the amount of pieces you're gonna have to juggle. And this is, I know I can't see the attendees, but I know there are a lot of parents probably in this crowd. And, as someone who has not done it yet, my hat is off to all of you all and my mom, my dad too, but really my mom, who, for 35 years has been navigating so many different complex things for my brother, whether it's his Medicaid, it's housing, it's that every day there is something new. And I think for those of us maybe who haven't started yet, when you see that whole picture, it's kind of daunting to think about like, I have to like, how many acronyms do I have to learn right now? And
Right.
so, I think, one, what can be done to make that more manageable? And I know so many people, Tammy, I know you all work at this, Anne's work, so many people are working this. How do you make those responsibilities more navigable? Because, I like to think of it as like a race course. Like my mom has been driving this race course at about 100 miles an hour for 35 years. I'm just not going to be able to jump in the car and start driving 100 miles an hour when it's time. So, how can I and other siblings who know we have to take this on break a little piece off here and there? It sounds like that's exactly what Anne and her mom are doing, where it's okay, I got going 5 miles an hour, I got going 10 miles an hour. I understand this now. But just, I think, it's just a real fear for siblings of what do I have to take on when I have my own life and this seems all complex. And, you know, there are ways to solve it. And, I think, again, circling back to the beginning, starting to talk about it's the best way. And, because you don't know until you start talking about it.
Absolutely. It has, if you guys sitting here, have any of you started having those and I know you talked about you and your mom a little bit. Have you started having, or Kim, did you have, I know you said you really didn't have a chance to plan. What are the things you wish you had heard? But what are those things, what are those conversational topics that are either happening or that you wish were happening, or things you wish you knew, now or then? Just anybody who wants to
I mean,
go
I
into
think a
that.
lot of it is getting organized, all the different records and doctors and therapy groups, and just trying to get it all in one place is helpful. Like I'm asking a lot of questions that I didn't used to ask just in case I have to jump in. Um, Going to a lot more doctor's appointments myself. I think what is most daunting to me is all the complex systems and yeah, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, making sure that tracking his, bank account and his trust. I mean, it's just like a lot of areas that are outside of my realm of expertise. So I think it's leaning on others, and I'm so grateful for groups like PEATC and a couple other local groups that really specialize in this that I can lean on. So I think a lot of it is also like surrounding yourself with kind of subject matter experts. So, and a lot of it, I know my mom learned from other moms and just like who've been through it, what's this paperwork I got in the mail yesterday? I don't know the first thing. And oh, I got that, I got it taken care of. Here's what you need to do. And walking them through that. And I think there's like generations of moms now, like now we're helping the next generation. And so I think siblings need to do kind of the same thing for each other in some ways, but then also leaning on others who get it. So I think that would
Yeah.
be my biggest advice.
One really small and kind of related to that tactical thing that's definitely helped me, and it's not much time at all when you're thinking about like how to get my sibling more involved, is joining the annual ISP meeting. And, I don't live in the same place as my brother. Thankfully, we're all on Zoom as we are here. And like just as a first step, a couple years back, my mom was like, you should just join this meeting. It's once a year, it's an hour. You're gonna just get like it's not gonna overwhelm, and you're gonna get a good sense of like who the players are, what Owen's goals are for the year. And it's just been an easy way that has been like a lighter lift to feel like, okay, like I'm in the
Hmm.
mix a little more and have questions that I can ask my mom or my dad of like, hey, just heard that. Like what's the deal there?
That's good, Walter, because my kids say to me, I try to bring it up when we're all together. I bring up, okay, so when I'm not here anymore, and they said, would you please, at Thanksgiving, let's not talk about when you're going to die, right? So I like that idea on my side. Maybe it's just bringing them into a meeting, periodically, especially now that they're adults, and bringing them in to attend because they can do that virtually as well. But getting that and then having some conversations around that. That's good. Anybody else? On that? Like, what do you wish you knew? What do you wish you um, would start to communicate or figure out? Or what are you
Well,
scared of not knowing?
I'll say, with my mom, and my mom was a LPN, so that helped even
Uh,
more.
mhm.
She knew what she was doing. But growing up, she would always include me in when things were, going on with Barry, or he had a doctor's appointment or the results and so forth. So, you know, she knew she wouldn't always be there. And so she would include me in with whatever was going on with him, his program. Barry is a cancer survivor. And so when the doctors determined he had cancer, she involved me in that whole process. Um, and he went through proton because he has a shunt in his head and his stomach, so he can't do radiation and so forth. So I was involved in that entire process. So
Okay.
she tried as much as she could to involve me in things, and at one point she was considering um having it set up that if something happened with her that he would be placed in housing, and so forth. So, there were little things that she would mention to me. And so, I wasn't uh, totally clueless, but at the time that everything took place,
Right.
not being able to find records and so forth. But also the flip side of that too is, and I guess for Walter, I guess all three of you maybe, um, is that when something you'll need to think about if you haven't already is as your loved one, your parents pass on, being able to, I don't know, talk through, work through that transition with your sibling, um, because, there is a difference there. Barry was, of course, very close to my mom. If she went out of town, he went out of town. They were always on the road together. Um, and so, you know, him knowing that things are changing, he's no longer living in the house he grew up in since we were a kid. And also, you know, being able to emotionally deal with the loss. And so those are some of the other things that if you haven't considered that you might want to consider. Um, we have a really big church family and friends and family members that has helped him to navigate through that. And, I did some small things around the house and in his room to try and make it feel, more like home in a sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
with pictures of family members and friends and things growing up and some other things. So just something to throw out there too.
Mm, yeah.
Like grief is a topic that is, yeah, it's difficult. I remember like my brother doesn't understand that, like, why can't I see dad anymore? And even 10 years later doesn't understand it. And we lost both grandmothers that he was very close with and my dad within a couple months of each other. And so it was just so much at once for him. And then to articulate that and to we've a lot of pictures and stories and memories and videos and as much as we can do, but I think that's definitely a theme and a topic to have on everyone's mind.
Absolutely. Well, and then, on that, you and Kim, you brought up the grief piece. So you in those cases, and you guys who are sitting here and talking about possibly taking over the care or at least overseeing the care of your sibling one day, um, when that day happens, or that day happened with Kim, not only does that you have that sudden change, but you also have the change of the person who was doing that. Most of the time, I think with you guys, it's your over here and your mom, um, is now not there, and you've lost your mom or you've lost your parent, and navigating that, because that in it without a child with a disability comes with all the questions of, well, where's mom's this, where's the insurance policy, where's the bank account information. So you've got all that over here, and then you have it over here with your sibling and that kind of thing. How um what do you think, how, Kim, how did you navigate some of that? And Anne, you navigated it somewhat with your dad. I mean, you still have your mom, but you lost your dad and your grandparents, your grandmothers, right? Grandmothers. Um, or what is needed for the parents listening? What are the things that might be helpful to help prepare someone to navigate that?
Um, I didn't start it right away. So in the beginning it was hard. It was really hard. Um, but eventually I moved into getting counseling.
Mhm.
So and it's been really good to be able to talk through, the grieving periods of the loss of both parents no longer being here, and just all the other dynamics of things that I think everybody's mentioned on the call, as far as some of the struggles of caregiving and all the things that you have to keep up with and do, and just the day to day, where
Yeah.
some days I feel like I'm struggle to catch my breath. And, as I described to somebody the other day, on some days, you know, I feel like, if it's a routine, I get up, we get ready, he goes to his program, he gets picked up for his program, I go to work, get off, we might have to make a couple of stops. By the time I get home, I have various things to prep for myself and him the next day, clothes, food. all of those things. And then by the time that's all said and done, it's time for me to put my head back down. so, so there are days when it's like that, and it's hard. And then there's other days where, it's not as heavy, and we hang out, go somewhere, do something, go out to eat, what have you. So yeah, it's a day to day. It is a
Yeah.
truly a day to day, um, you know, in managing all of that. But counseling has definitely helped,
Okay.
come a long way.
Anybody else want to feed into that? Like what at this moment, even in this conversation, are you thinking, man, I need to know I need to figure this out? Or do you wish was there, or are you planning already for things to be in place?
I mean, I think like as Ann and Kim are talking about, like you kind of do the best you can. And like Tammy, you mentioned where it's,
Yeah.
take a sibling with a disability out of it. This is one of the most challenging moments emotionally that like you are going to face in your life. And so, you know, I think I know it's going to be hard. There's no other way. You're managing a bunch of huge
Right.
transitions at once. Uh, Trying to speak English here, and I think just kind of, make sure again, like I'm having these conversations with my parents that they feel, you know, that they feel secure in what the future looks like, that we're all on the same page. I think that's one thing, like I hear from some, you know, siblings who feel like there might be a misalignment of like what my mom expects versus what I expect to happen. So I
Right.
think as much as I can get on the same page as my mom and dad, and we have those conversations, like, what do you want your last 10 years to 5 years to look like? Like, what should that look like? What does that mean for Owen? What does that mean for me? And then also, I just feel like very lucky. Like, I have a group, my wife is awesome, and I feel very fortunate to have a partner that, is in the boat with me here. And that was, a huge, I also don't take for granted that not just end of life stuff, but having a partner who like she married me and Owen's part of the package deal. And, getting to, having that as part of the family.
Yeah, I
So, oh, go ahead, Nia. Yeah.
oh, I was just going to share. I do tend to get a lot of anxiety when I think about that moment coming.
I bet. I
But
bet.
yeah, but it's so hard to know where things will be when that time comes, right? Where will my sister be on the path to achieving the goals that she has? Where will I even be employment wise and otherwise? So and how will both of my parents be in that moment? Maybe there's still one who's around and helping. There's so many unknowns that I find it really challenging to think about in great depth. We have had a lot of planning conversations around the aspects that we can plan for, but the emotional aspect and some of the things that you just can't anticipate in advance, I've just kind of adopted a motto of going with the flow and just trying to know that I have to be mentally prepared and ready when that time comes, even though I don't know what that actually means at this moment in detail. So I'm just trying to approach it from that perspective instead of getting too wrapped up in the anxiety that can easily come from it.
Well,
Yeah.
and I, you know, thinking about you guys, and you're not at the point where I'm at right now. Some of the things that could possibly be done is, and I don't know, as far as how much time you spend with your siblings, but you know, having them to come over for a week, you know, um, or whatever time frame, so that you kind of start to pay attention to, things that you may not have realized that they need, or things you may have to do, that starts to, make you think about some things. And it also starts to get you a little bit more comfortable with, okay, well, I know they like this, I know they don't like that, I know they need this, that, or the other. Um, those things. And, like Walter said, joining the yearly call, there is so much information that is discussed in that call, with your loved one. Also, if possible, you know, attending some of their doctor's appointments or dental appointments or some of those things so that you have situational awareness of what goes on in those appointments, how they react. You
Mhm.
know, kind of a funny, but maybe not. When I took my brother to the dentist, I don't know how long ago he had been to the dentist. My mom handled all that stuff. So when I took him to the dentist, he had to get his teeth cleaned. Um, he he was just so nervous. He held my hand so tight. And I'm like, Barry, I'm standing right here. It's okay. And the guy hadn't gotten next to him with the drill yet, and he started hollering, and I just laughed so bad. And so he was laughing with me, but I was like, okay. But now, he's fine. He gets there, he sits in the chair, and he lets them do their thing. But yeah, you get to experience some of those things, and notice, pay attention to some little things. You may not have known about your sibling. So just some tips there.
That's great. That's great. So, we've talked, you guys have shared some of where you're at and where you may be at some point. What kinds, and someone is asking in the chat too, so where do you get support from? So you or siblings in general, where do you guys think people can draw support from now and later when I guess when their parents have passed and it is them and their sibling. That is the family at that point. And I know, Walter, you've mentioned already, your spouse, and Kim, I know you mentioned you have a tight um, family group and church community group as well. Outside of those two things, anybody else, where do you find the support you need
And I think
through this?
for me, I mean, I think it's through the relationships with other families, and I've gotten to know so many families in my role with the Autism Society, but finding those who have experienced, been on a similar journey, leaning on others. I try to keep as big of a support network as possible. I'm fortunate to have some really good friends and a strong family, and just making sure I take time to keep up with those relationships. So, but I
Right.
think learning as much as I can from others and um, leaning on those support networks as much as possible, not being shy to, you know, what if you ask for help, the worst they can say is, sorry, can't right now. But I think that would be my advice.
That's great.
I would also recommend, I guess it echoes some of what some folks have talked about in terms of the importance of staying aware of what's happening with your sibling. And I am trying to do that. And even though I don't live in the same place, I'm trying to, my mom and I have regular conversations where she updates me on what's going on. But the other way I try to stay aware that's really helped me feel better about what could be on the horizon is just being aware of the service system. And there's free webinars all the time, like this one. And they're not always targeted towards siblings. Most of the time they're not really, which I think is one thing that's really missing. Because a lot of the information is still relevant for siblings. I think there is additional information that could be relevant for siblings if they targeted them as well. But you can seek those out as you have time. And I'm fortunate that my job kind of allows me to learn about the service system through that avenue, but you can do it in the evenings, weekends, join the webinars, just get the recording even, and just be aware of the Medicaid program, be aware of ABLE accounts or financial aspects that might be relevant to you. That's just helped kind of calm me a little bit because the people in my life, I've got great friends and family, of course. And of course, my family and I talk and support each other, but my friends don't really understand this. They're not in that situation. So I don't feel like I haven't felt that level of support from them. I think I've felt more of the isolation Anne mentioned at the beginning when she was growing up. So more through just work and the webinars where I've gotten more of that support.
And you mentioned something good there, Nia, as far as Medicare and Medicaid. You know, getting to, know what services your sibling is receiving through Medicare and Medicaid, um, what level they're at, that would tell you the amount of services they can get, um, because they do offer so much that you're able to tap into. Um, like one of the things that I've received, and I think it's through his Medicare, is instead of having to, if Barry gets sick or something, taking him into a emergency services or care or department. Um, I've there's a through the Medicare program, they reached out to me and offered to send a tablet, and the tablet connects right into um, the doctor's a doctor or nurse or what have you,
Mhm.
and he can be seen in a sense right there at home, and they are able to prescribe medicines, send them to your home, or you can just go pick them up from, Rite Aid or wherever. And instead of having to go sit in, an emergency room for however long hours with other sick individuals and so forth. And so, there's things like that. There's other things through his program that they offer. You might find some additional support there with someone, being able to come out to the home and be with that individual, just a variety of things. You just, that's something you could research and tap into and get more
Right.
information on too.
Yeah, that's really important. And that goes back to those conversations all along and attending those meetings or finding out what services, I always say, what's the vocabulary, right? What's the vocabulary I'm having in this conversation? What are the words I need to know what they mean? Um, and who do I talk to find out what does that mean for this individual? So Medicare, but what does that mean for us, right? What is that, and how to navigate those? And it's taking it in chunks, right? Taking it in small bites, and then you have a chunk, and here you go. But it's a lot. It's a lot as a parent. I mean, we work with parents at PEATC mostly, not always, but the largest group is parents. And the constant, thing we hear is when we talk about that what I call transition to adulthood, those adult services is, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. And so I think it goes back to what you guys have been saying about, figuring out pieces of it, and Nia attending, trainings and stuff. And I know our trainings are open to anyone. We talk to people as family members. So, that we actually have something coming up soon, uh, later this month, and there's not much of this month left, and early next month on Medicaid waivers. Here in Virginia, different. If you're in another state, if you're calling, from another state, you'd need to find out how it works in your state. Social Security is across the board. We do Social Security, but there's other organizations as well. So trainings on those. But like you said, sometimes just getting the vocabulary is helpful. So Walter, how about you? Anything you want to add to that before we move forward?
I mean, no, I think that was pretty comprehensive, all the different ways, people can
Okay.
get support. And, I think just that it's gonna look, and for the parents out there, it's gonna look different for each sibling, what works for them. I
That's
think
right.
it'll also look different between if you have three, if you have two neurotypical children. One of them might be more engaged, another might be less engaged. One might respond really well to meeting other siblings. Another one might say, like, let me just go like do some webinars and figure it out that way. I think just like everything, it's very much not a one size fits all, but like all three of, my panelists said, there's a lot of great stuff out there you can tap into.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna be wrapping it up here in just a few minutes, but before I kind of transition us to kind of a closing out and a reflection time a little bit, anything I've left out, and Nia, Kim, Walter, that you'd like to, anything I didn't ask a question about that you'd like to share or add to this conversation? Um,
I mean,
oh, go ahead, Walter.
oh, sorry. I guess one thing, as I just talked about supports, and like there's a little bit of a plug, but
Yeah, yeah, go.
both for any, my panelists, but any parent who might have an adult sibling, an adult sibling there. I organize regular sibling gatherings. It's siblings from all over the country. It's just like this. It's virtual. People just get together and, share experiences, trade advice. It's very low pressure. We have siblings that join and just sit there and watch and listen. You can turn your camera off, you could jump in, but it's been really great for me just to connect and grow my network of siblings. Because when I think of like support, just being able to talk to someone like Anne, who, when I get to catch up with her, and she just gets it in the way that like other siblings, just like parents probably are like, only another parent like me truly understands this. I think we siblings often feel the same way. So if,
Yeah,
any parents that might be interested in their kids joining, Tammy's got my email and I would love to, the more the merrier.
awesome. Awesome. Anybody else? I
Yeah,
don't
I'll
want to.
just add
Yep.
one thought that came to me listening to everyone talk today is and maybe this already exists. I don't know. If it does, I haven't seen it, but I think some sort of toolkit maybe to help parents have these conversations with siblings, and then siblings, in turn also to have these conversations, and also to know what to plan for on each side. Ways that parents can build siblings into legal documents and service plans moving forward, ways that things that siblings should think about, like checklists. Just having all of that in one place, I think, to facilitate it for families. Again, knowing that each family is different, as Walter mentioned, but just having some checklists and kind of guidelines, and just even what are the topic areas that families should
Right.
be thinking about, I think would be really helpful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I agree. I think, when you said that, it reminds me of things like guardianship. And I know all families don't have guardianship in their family and may have support decision making or power of attorney or other decision making options. But a lot of parents we talk to, who do have, if they have guardianship, they assume if they pass away that someone else becomes the legal guardian, like their other child, and it's not that case. That's not the case. And I think for people to understand that still has to be another court proceeding, right? And unless you have co-guardianship set up at that point. And you're right. I mean, there's so many little things that could be a simple, quick chunk of information so that you could figure out, So maybe we'll continue to work together as a group, on coming up with some of those things, because you guys have lived it, and are living it. So that's really important. So let's tie up tonight. We started with you sharing about you and your sibling, and I want to kind of end that way as well. I'd like for you guys to take a moment and, share with all of us what is something today, something about your sibling that brings you joy, in the space that you're in today, and who you are.
I'm happy to go. I
Okay.
would say his sense of humor.
Ah,
And it always catches me off guard. He'll come in, like just hit you with something witty all of a sudden, and it's really neat to see and to know that, he's so highly intelligent, and they're just, it's incredible to see his mind and be part of that, especially on the tough days.
yeah.
He'll catch you off guard in such a great way. So there's a lot of joy and a lot of tenderness there, and the pure innocence too, that he brings. So
Thank you. Thank you for
that's what I
sharing
would
that.
share.
Awesome.
I was thinking along the same lines of humor, but because to try to say something slightly different, my sister loves holidays and Christmas in particular, and so she always brings a lot of the joy, and it's wonderful to still have that at this age. Getting so excited for presents, and just doing things like Mario Kart, and just having fun and making jokes, and being able to relax despite the everyday challenges.
Thank you.
Are you going, Walter?
I saw you guys playing mute unmute.
Um, I would echo what Ann and Nia have both said. My brother's personality, he's quick with a comeback, so he always keeps you laughing with how he comes back with stuff is like, oh my gosh. Um, but I also get pure joy out of as much, as much as we've been through, with how quickly I had to take on his care and all the challenges and changes that we faced, is the fact that, he seems to be happy, that I'm able to care for him, fully, and um, and just, take him where he wants to go, see family, what have you. That those things bring me joy, that I've been able to just take on what my mom left off with. And so, yeah,
That's great.
there you
I,
go,
you
Walter.
know, I, I would just say for me, our relationship, which I think is as we've gotten older, has grown stronger and we've gotten closer. He's much more talkative and verbal than he was when he was a, adolescent or a teenager. We talk every day now, just,
Yeah.
being his brother and, checking in, hearing how the day goes, talking movies, whatever it is. I think just, where we are and, where we'll keep going from here just brings me a lot of joy.
Well, I really appreciate you guys sharing those. That's a great, it brought me joy to hear them. And I know that sounds trite, but I don't mean it that way. It really did. Makes me smile. I feel like I could feel the care and the love and the joy that you have together with your siblings. So we really appreciate you being willing to open up the doors of your world a little bit for all of us out here, and just the information. I know there's been a couple of comments even in the chat about how excellent and what amazing conversation that's much needed around this adult sibling topic. So thank you for your time. Thanks to all who attended, and we will call it a night. Have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and this week, got a little bit more of it left. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.